that's fine.
Are you able to pull out a link from within the box?
Yep, I'm sending it to Twitter.
You're at HIghway1 too, just in case people are checking that. Got it.
Are you guys able to get in? It doesn't say that anybody's here right now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, so that's you.
I don't see the Q&A, so how do I? Yeah, I don't see any kind of Q&A.
This is ridiculous.
Also, I keep saying it's blocking it for me.
Yeah,
All right, we've got a bunch of viewers on there. Sorry for the questions, or sorry for the confusion. All right, so if you want to start putting your questions into the Q&A, I see some of you have found it, but those aren't actual questions. Well, some questions that are coming up separately is one, crowdfunding guidelines. So in general, we think that you should know what your product is, have had it in the hands of customers, and know how you're going to manufacture it before you go to crowdfunding. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, because sometimes crowdfunding is a great way to prove that customers actually want your product and to get you some money in the meantime. So what we really recommend for companies that are at the stage for HIghway1 is that you either hold off on crowdfunding or you do small batches. So 5, 10, 25, depending on the size of your product, how hard it is to make, and how mature it is. The best companies are the ones that have done small batch, like 5 or 10, and then a month later do 5 or 10, a month later do 5 or 10, each time iterating, each time hitting a new demographic of customers and learning along the way. Now, another question we just got from Matthew is, does HIghway1 participate in CES in Las Vegas? We'll be there. A bunch of our teams will be there. In general, we found CES a great place for hardware startups to get connected. So in terms of what resources we have for electrical, mechanical, and design, we have 2 mechanical engineers On staff, we have a senior electrical engineer, and then we have a senior design person. Those are all included in part of the program. So the way the program works is we give you up to $100,000 in cash in exchange for equity. And then we charge a small program fee, which includes all your rent while you're here, use of the staff, working with the staff, and use of the shop, as well as the China trip and demo day. So I have a question from Adrian. What are your recommendations for idea stage teams? Is it worth applying to HIghway1? Any accelerators out there that are more idea stage friendly, if you will? So I'm going to answer that question now. Well, in general at HIghway1, we like to see a prototype. So we have not accepted any teams that have not already developed a prototype. However, depending on the rock starness of your team, what the product is, it seems like even in the month before applications are due, applications end and when we'll actually do the selection, any team that's worth their salt that would make it through the program could build a prototype. So there should really be nothing holding you back from that. Now, if you're still trying to figure out what your idea is so you can't make a prototype, then I would recommend a lot of different programs. Look at your university, look at regional accelerators, but HIghway1 is not the place for you. We really want to see that the team can make things, that the idea is possible, and the customers want it. So that question's done. Are there any other questions? So from Jesper, do we do convertibles? I assume you mean convertible notes. In general, no. But if you have raised a significant amount of cash at a priced valuation, then yes, we would absolutely consider that. However, most of the time, the companies coming in have raised some amount of money, but not enough to warrant a valuation. In general, we think that early stage startups that don't have a product yet, it's unfair to them to figure out a valuation. We don't actually know what the product's worth and how you can execute. So we purchase stock, we purchase common stocks who are aligned with the founder at the par value so that it doesn't raise your valuation. Generally, they go on to raise money at a valuation or at a capped note post HIghway1. But again, we will consider convertible notes if the company has raised money at a set valuation. So I just had a question about the video for the HIghway1 application. In general, we want to see the product working. It should be a minute. It doesn't have to be well produced, but is it working? What's the condition of it? Maybe a use case or two. But the most important thing is to actually submit the video, because otherwise we won't really consider you. All right. At HIghway1, do you require a patent if your startup just built a prototype? Not yet. Most companies are pretty early. Patents can get expensive. A lot of our companies end up conferring with lawyers that are on our mentoring, or that they meet through our mentoring program, or even the lawyers that we set them up with on their way in. So that's something we'll work with you on and help you out with. However, it's always good to start thinking about your patent portfolio and what that looks like. Jeff Schox, S-C-H-O-X, is about to release a new book on that. And we find his thinking is pretty detailed and rich. We also covered this a little bit in The Hardware Startup, which is the book that I did with Renee DeResta and HIghway1's lead engineer, Ryan Vineyard. And you can get that from O'Reilly. All right, from Jorge, do you have experience working with companies that go the ODM route? So at HIghway1, we're working with companies in the prototype stage, and we're getting them ready for manufacturing. So considering an ODM route is definitely something that we talk to them about. In general, for a hardware startup, you want to figure out what is core to your business. Often, in the first couple of years, it's going to be the hardware, then moving on to the software, data, and services. So an ODM, depending on what you're building, could be the right choice. However, often hardware startups that come through HIghway1 are creating something totally new. And so ODMs aren't really set up to service them. So as with all things hardware and startups, it depends. Question from Timothy, and we're getting some of these questions in from email. Do we consider enterprise robotics? Yeah, that is a space that we're super excited about. We've had a couple of companies in that space, Modbot and Updroid. Both are looking at enterprise from kind of different angles. Both started out in the prosumer, kind of like mature maker / experimental enterprise. Modbot is now moving more towards industrial now that they've raised money and figured out what they're doing. Updroid is still figuring out what they're doing, but that's what makes sense for them while they're at HIghway1. So we're definitely looking for robotics companies. You have to be, it's a competitive space. However, it's high risk, high reward. So we really look for quality teams that are building something special and know this market. From Jesper, will you be able to help with accommodation or is there a co-location pad? So we provide you with money for your company. Some of that will go towards your San Francisco living expenses. We connect you with all the other teams that are coming in. Often they end up renting houses together. And there are a number of co-location pads near HIghway1, and we have contacts with some of them. But in general, the teams have always taken that on as their task, and it hasn't been that awful. Okay, when looking at the teams applying, what qualities do you look for? So when you're doing a hardware startup, you have all the same problems as any regular startup. So you have to do business, you have to do marketing, you have to develop software, you have to think about your customers and the design, and then you also have to build the thing. So I really like McClure's model of you need a hustler to handle biz dev marketing and basically, get money in the door. You need a designer who's going to think about the customer and make sure the product is beautiful and works well. And you need a hacker to build the software. We add a maker, someone who owns the hardware. So in general, we're looking for a 2 to 4 person team that has built a prototype, that has shown they can work together, that has shown some level of traction, and has a prototype that they can show to us. We really prefer teams that are building a new market and have thought about what that looks like. Jesper is asking, can we alternate the team members while attending the program? We've had teams do that. In general, we feel that the hardware team, the technical team should be here, and there should be a business person here as well. There are a lot of folks who come through HIghway1 on a weekly basis, and you never know what day someone who could be really, really valuable to your team comes in the door. And we also have a lot of networking events. So if you don't have someone here to catch those connections, you can really miss out. And given that we are a hardware accelerator with a lot of engineering and design resources, it would make very little sense for you not to have your hardware team co-located here. Can I comment on Canadian companies obtaining visas for the duration of the program? In general, we haven't had too much problem with companies and visas because we leave midway through the program to go to China, and so you're not here for more than 90 days. Generally, we don't even worry about that during the onboarding or during the selection process, and then we'll connect you with various international teams on your way in. So we've had teams from Canada, the UK, Ireland, South Africa, Denmark, and China, and Australia. So I think you'll do okay. How important is traction, our pre-sales requirement? loop. In general, we don't want you to have done any major pre-sales. We do like to see traction. We like to see traction in terms of customer research, in terms of product in the hands of customers, and seeing that you can actually make your prototype. Because you're a hardware startup and because it's so difficult to make more than 2 or 3 of your product, we don't really want you to do pre-sales. We want you to focus more on just getting quick customer feedback as opposed to locking into a specific design. What is the deadline for current incubation process? When is it starting? So the deadline for getting applications in is next Monday at midnight PST. So that's November 16th, midnight Pacific time. And it'll be starting the first week of February. So Timothy asked, we are 3 weeks out from finishing our prototype. Can we submit on Monday and then send in the prototype video in a few weeks? That will probably work, Tim, but you should show us what you have so far. And we could potentially schedule the engineering review for a bit later, but it's better to let us know like what your progress is now, because we have a bunch of different gates. We first just do an up-down on your application. What do we think of the team? What do we think of the idea, the market, and our judgment on where you are? Then we do a business review where we look at the size of the market, the quality of the team, funding. Then we do an engineering review, and that can be several meetings where we just evaluate the team, your technical prowess, and how far along the prototype is. And then we have further discussions after that. So Nima asked, what would the value be of a HIghway1 for a B2B drone startup? Our target market is mainly comprised of multi-billion-dollar energy companies. Thanks. Well, we would help you with your drone. We will help you with targeting that market and help you with team formation and help you meet VCs. Pretty much the same as we do for all the other companies that come in. Natalia wants to know if we're only looking for innovative ideas, will innovative implementation work as well? What is your best team? Honestly, the best teams are the ones that execute. It's pretty easy to have crazy ideas. It's actually executing on them that really matters. And so we've had some pretty mundane ideas that have been executed incredibly well. Often those teams, we wait until if it's something that is a little more common, we might wait and see how they do. But in general, we are still pretty open to any type of team that is entering. I mean, we look at the quality of the team, the prototype, and the size of the market. So Albert has said that not all of his team can be in San Francisco for the entirety of the program. In general, this gets into something we'd have to evaluate with you during the application process. We'd want to make sure that you could actually handle the program, given how far along you are, the quality of the team, what you're trying to do, and who can actually be here. Again, I think you really want your hardware tech team here, and you want someone who can handle business here. And otherwise, we can work on this. We recently had a team where the CEO/chief scientist was here along with his electrical engineer, but his software person was back in Boston. So Alejandro has asked, how important is it to have a product designer in our team? And have you sponsored before any team without a designer? So in general, we think that having a design focus is important, but we don't necessarily require you to have a designer on the team. Often, even if you do have a designer on the team, we still recommend that you work with an outside industrial design firm because they have a lot of experience with products and can really help you get a professional edge. Designers are a lot like a brand. And so, we've had our teams work with IDEO, Ammunition Group, Scott Herbst, and a number of other teams. And you want to see which one is going to work for you. It is important that someone on the team focus on design. And you realize that down the road, you may need a full-time designer, but often a hardware startup doesn't need one right away. So Marius has a wearable device that helps insomniacs reduce their time to sleep up to 85%. But this device requires an FDA pre-market notification. We've had a number of FDA compliant companies go through here. In fact, we have 2 in the program right now. So this is not a problem for us. We have FDA consultants that we can connect you with. Jeff Shocks, again, has done work with FDA companies. And we found in general, as long as the product really works and the founders are credible, that medical companies are some of our biggest successes. And so investors are no longer as worried about FDA as far as we've noticed. And we think that this is an area that we're super interested in. So definitely please apply. Okay, Dino has said that with finances, we can build a prototype in just under 4 months. We have a proof in Math Lab and other engineering programs that our product works. We need financing and a little bit of help. What are our chances to enter HIghway1? I don't know for sure, Dino, but it sounds like you're early. We accepted a company in this time that actually had their algorithms in Math Lab, and their algorithms are still in Math Lab. So unfortunately, that has perhaps burned us a bit on strictly algorithm-based companies. We really like to see a company that's off Arduino on their own hardware and is ready for ID and has been in the hands of customers. That said, you should apply, because often we like to get to know companies. If you're doing something interesting, we might be able to give you some advice, and we can stay in touch, and then perhaps you'd be right for us the next time around. Plus, who knows, with the right incentive, maybe you could get that prototype done early. Adrian asks if it's typical for HIghway1 teams to quit their day jobs to focus on HIghway1 and develop the startup exclusively. In general, the teams are full-time here. On occasion, we've allowed 1 or 2 members of a team, if it's a larger team, to stay part-time or do consulting. But in general, if we're going to invest up to $100,000 in your company, we expect you to invest all of your time. I mean, starting a startup is not easy. Starting a startup takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a certain amount of risk. High risk, high reward. So yeah, we expect you to work full-time on this. In fact, more than full-time, more like 80, 90 hours a week. All right. Moxley. Moxley is doing great. They've hit their goal in terms of fundraising. Their product is closer to manufacturing, and they are hitting all the marks, but they will have a longer road to manufacturing due to FDA. So that's their next step. And in the spring, they'll be going through that process. And then I can't speak to any other dates, but yeah, the Moxley team is great. And considering where they were when they joined the program, they've made it very, very far. All right, does HIghway1 prefer prototypes that are built with off-the-shelf materials or from scratch? You know, prototyping is all about iterative tests, and it's proving out whether or not an assumption or a thesis is correct or wrong. And so it all depends on what you're trying to prove. If it's form factor, then you want to start with foam and clay, then maybe move to wood or 3D plastic. It's all about speed and answering those questions quickly. If you can test if your product is worthwhile by using Tupperware and Arduino board, then great. By the time you come to us, and certainly by the time you enter the program, we expect it to be on your own hardware. It's probably more important on the electronics, but we'd like to see some basis for enclosures. We accept teams that have various levels of works like prototypes. So again, it's almost more important to show that you can do things and that you have done them than for them to be perfect. When you come in here, we will work with you on that iterative process of prototyping. Nima, yes, we have access to indoor, outdoor flight areas for legally testing your robot, assuming you fly legally. More outdoors, we have a parking lot in the back, and we've had a drone company before, and they flew it back there. Whether or not indoors, we'd have to really evaluate what you were trying to do. Alejandro, it does not matter to us if your company is incorporated in the US, assuming it's a country that we operate in. So we've had companies from Europe that have not incorporated here. However, often companies do end up incorporating in the US. And that's because they want to raise money from Silicon Valley VCs. And they are more likely to do that if they are a US corporation. So a number of our companies have gone through that process, and we can help you with that. Can you be in HIghway1 NYC at the same time? We've had companies do that. The programs work synergistically together. It can be distracting. You won't get as far in your hardware. However, the YC program is excellent. So if that was the case, we would definitely be willing to talk about it. Jesper says, we work a lot with mock-ups and design iterations as part of our prototyping and pre-prototyping. Do you agree that this counts towards customer validation? Yeah, this is exactly the kind of customer research we want to see. A hardware startup can easily go through 100 different prototypes where you're modifying the feel of something or the color or the finish. And so being able to move through these quickly is super important. And so you don't want to spend a lot of money on something you're going to throw away the next day. Nicola asks, do you typically look for companies with some funding already, or have companies with no major funding been accepted? I would estimate that half of our companies up to date have not had any major funding. And this is where we are first money in. Companies like Navdi, which has now raised over $30 million in between crowdfunding and VC, we were the first $20,000 into the company. So yes, we definitely do. That said, it's about half have funding and half don't. Do most of your startups go through the same CMs for HIghway1, or is it a unique pairing between a startup that needs VS when the CM can offer? So we're part of PCH. PCH is a large supply chain management company. They do work with Little Bits, which is a startup, and they do work with Apple. So they can scale, high to low based on demand. Not all the companies end up working with PCH, and there's neither a guarantee nor a requirement about that. We have a vetted list of manufacturers that we connect all of our companies to. And so we find that most companies are able to find a manufacturing partner through those, or they find their own. Cinder, when they're doing their grill, they found their own partner, and we'll help them vet. Maria says that we already have a company that helps babies improve their sleep. Are you still interested in another company that improves not the baby's sleep, but mature user sleep? So we think sleep is a big market. We were just looking at a sleep company earlier today and are quite interested in it. So we'd have to know a little bit more, but in general, we don't take competitors into the same cohort, but we're not concerned about that across cohorts. So I'd be quite interested to learn what you have, Marius. So Adrian says, our team doesn't have the patent of our invention, but we have everything ready to start the process. Should we start with it in our country or wait to see if we qualify and make the process under the HIghway1 guide? Depending on where you plan on operating, I would run with your patent process there. If you are planning to come to Highway 1, then I would just, and then operate in the US, I would wait. If you plan on going back to your country and you feel that patent protection is useful, then I would get it there. But we'll let you know by December 18th for sure. So you could probably hold off. All right, are there any more questions? Yes. What is our most successful company? What scale of financial success have you seen? Any unicorns yet? Well, we have a couple of companies that have the potential to be unicorns. No idea yet, but at 2 years in, we've got one of the companies I'm thinking of just graduated and is just raising $4 million. So they have a long way to go. But yeah, we have a couple of really solid companies. I would say our most successful so far is Navdi, having raised over 30 million. But Q, Ringly, Transformair are all companies, and Modbot are all companies that are doing quite well and are just early. Does it ever not make sense to do crowdfunding after Highway 1? Well, honestly, Adrian, it really depends on what you're trying to make and who you're trying to sell to. If your product, so kind of the three options as we look at it, well, 4 is Kickstarter versus Indiegogo versus doing it on your own site versus not doing it. Well, if you're B2B, it probably doesn't make sense to do crowdfunding at all. If you are doing a product that doesn't have a long lead time, like say Moxley, a woman is going to buy her breast pump a couple of months before her pregnancy, before the baby is born. So doing crowdfunding and have it be a 9-month, year-long cycle doesn't make sense. After that, once you've determined crowdfunding actually works for you, then with Kickstarter, to figure out, do I meet their criteria? Am I comfortable with the way Kickstarter handles crowdfunding? Indiegogo lets more different types of products, especially medical, up on their website, and they provide a lot of tools. Doing it on your own site, you miss out on the network, you have to own your own website, and you have to have your own ad budget. However, if you're trying to do something high-end, like say Kronos or Ringly, and you don't want to be on a crowdfunding site because you don't want to dilute their brand, then that can make a lot of sense. Navdi had a big budget for ads, which is one of the reasons why they were able to raise so much money via crowdfunding. Would they have been able to do that through Kickstarter and Indiegogo? It's hard to know, but unlikely. Jorge wants to know if I'm specifically looking for unicorns. We certainly want companies that have the potential to go big, but to be too focused right now on what the end result is when that result is not going to be known for 7 to 10 years would be a little short-sighted for us. So right now we're just really looking for strong teams that have a proven ability to execute, that are doing something interesting and have a big impact. As a hardware IoT startup, we will later have a lot going on in terms of software development and less going on the hardware side. How is your network resources for that? That's from Jesper. We focus a lot on hardware. However, I think any connected hardware company is going to have a product line. You're going to have to keep developing, and you're going to have to manage your manufacturer. So, if you don't think that you're going to keep someone on full time, you can always just use contractors to start and develop a long-term relationship with them. But, look at Fitbit. They have had to build up their hardware teams, and that institutional knowledge has really served them well as they've developed the Fitbit Charge and the HR and made a lot of progress. Product lines are where hardware companies start to show a lot of their value and staying power. So in terms of support for the visa application process from Europe, once approved for the program, we'll connect you with our lawyers that'll help you handle the company formation in the US and can give you some advice on visas. We'll also connect you with our former international teams. We'll provide you with an invitation letter. We've never had a team have a problem with a visa that was unique to coming to Highway 1. We recently had someone trapped in India for a while, but that was more to do with Indian bureaucracy than any sort of visa issue with the US. And he's back. All right, Philip asks if I have any thoughts about projects that involve smartwatches. Damn, Philip, it's pretty crowded out there. It'd have to be something pretty freaking special right now, because it's just unclear how someone, Pebble's done some amazing job, has done an amazing job as kind of the premier third-party smartwatch. The Android watches are really hard to differentiate between all the big players. Tag Heuer just came out with a new smartwatch earlier today. So the luxury brand is now being taken. WeThings has done an amazing job with their watch. So I'm open to seeing what you have, but that is a hard one to go after right now. Would you make decision about funding initially during interviews or during the program? We wouldn't need funding to start the program, but would like to plan your investment. We'll do it probably during the interviews, definitely before you come into the program, to figure out what your exact funding would look like. Again, we're funding folks up to $100,000. Can I share the approximate estimation of cost per person during the program, rent, food, transportation, etc.? I don't know for sure, but I think you could easily hit $2,000 to $2,500 per person per month while you're there, depending on how far away you live, if you rent a car, if you buy a car, if you are staying in like a startup house, how often you eat ramen versus burritos versus chicken meals. You can kind of control what your costs are, but don't get confused. Like San Francisco is expensive. Besides helping startups with prototyping and getting those into MVP, does HIghway1 help with the marketing or how to raise capital besides meeting with VCs? So we do help you work on your marketing plan, building your community. We have a PR team that works closely with the companies during the program. And we do coaching on how to raise capital with VCs. We have a crowdfunding week. We also have contacts with SVB. And though none of our companies have raised debt at the HIghway1 stage, that'll be good preparation for later. If the team doesn't have a final design, can that project be admitted in the accelerator and use that money for design? Marius, actually, that's exactly what most of our companies do. They come in with a very rough design. They have a functional prototype, more of a works-like prototype. And then in the first week, we have a mixer with about 15 world-class design firms who are all familiar with startups and startup rates. And we end up helping them make those deals and get a looks-like prototype by the end. The goal for the end of the program is to have a looks-like, works-like prototype. My team has 4 team members, hardware, UX, software, firmware. And only one is full-time. Is this something within your acceptance criteria? Philip, I would suggest that you still apply because that sounds like a pretty solid team. However, we would expect more of you to come on full-time. And if your co-founders are worth their salt and are truly dedicated, then they'll go for this. And Freon, any chance of a HIghway1 outpost on the East Coast? It's something we've considered. It's not something we're going to do right now. So for now, we'd need you to come to San Francisco. Any more questions? So I got a question from Matt, who I think is listening in, but is using a different mode. For those projects that are not accepted, what is the best source for finding seed funding in SF? I mean, AngelList is great for that. You could, depending on what you're doing, do a small crowdfunding campaign, then go on AngelList. But I liken AngelList to Twitter. You can't just go on Twitter and be like, oh, hey, here I am, and expect a lot of followers. You need to find people, court them, make sure they know that your account is there, interact with them, and then as you're producing quality content, folks will start to follow you, respond to you. Same thing with AngelList. So, or Acquire, or Seed Capital, or any of these other, there are a bunch of different programs like this, Ag Funder. So you could go and create a shop, find a syndicate that would sponsor you. Foundry has an angel group. There are a bunch of different companies or ways to get early stage funding like this. So Andreas wants to know if we can connect participants with local technical project managers in Shenzhen. We bring you over there. You'll meet some folks while you're there. We don't have any specific project managers that we connect teams with, but you'll definitely meet a bunch of people during the China trip. So our program is actually 16 weeks long. And in the beginning, we focus a lot on prototypes. Then we spend some time on storytelling. Then we really drive the companies to have the first build of their prototype. Then we take them to China for a while. And then we start the march towards demo day. So we have a 10-day tour to China, and we have some set activities, and then we have 3 days in China. And so like when NAVD came, they went to Taiwan to meet a potential vendor. When Warehouse went, they went to Shanghai to meet with a potential factory. So there's a lot, you are both booked and you have free time. The cost of accommodation, food, et cetera, can be deducted from the acceleration funding, or every member should have at least its own money. Doing a startup is expensive, and if you haven't raised funding, then often people have to dip into their own savings, and it can be quite challenging. So it is not like most of our companies end up housing together or sharing housing with other companies. But in general, sometimes the housing is paid for by the company, sometimes it's paid for out of salary. If a team is incomplete, Hustler plus Embedded Guide, does HIghway1 help to find new members for software app development, or those typically outsourced short-term, Odesk, et cetera, to fill in the blanks? We have relationships with Founder Dating, an AngelList, and you can start to look for people through those sources. But in general, that's your responsibility to find people. And we will help you land them and interview them as needed. But if you can't find full-time people, then Odesk, et cetera, various contractors is a great way to go. Yes, our next class will probably actually start in late summer of 2016, and that'll be for fall 2016. Jesper, how strict is your curriculum? We have several hours per week of curriculum that it's more in the beginning as we're trying to train you and when there's still time in the program. It peters out towards the end because folks get really nervous around demo day, understandably, and they want to get their prototypes done. Again, the goal is to show kind of a fundable prototype, a looks like, works like prototype by the end. And so we don't want to distract people with classes. All right. I don't see any more. Can we recruit a team member when in the program using the investment from Albert? Yes, you can. In fact, often teams do. Hardware takes a lot more people. And so we encourage you to bring more folks on. In your experience, do companies, after graduating from accelerator programs, relocate to SF or return to their native locale? Honestly, it's split. If you raise money in Silicon Valley, then you'll often permanently maintain ties here. If a company is international, often they'll send the development back home and the CEO will split their time. It really depends on the investors, how much traction there is, and how well you did. We've had teams be very successful coming here and then leaving, and then we've had other teams be required to move over here. A lot of our international teams end up staying here. All right, Matt has asked, is broad demographic SurveyMonkey good traction? I would say, I mean, it's okay. It's helpful to have that data, but it's not the same as getting out and testing with customers, letting them take it home. But SurveyMonkey is super handy. Branding and trademarking, often that's done with the IT firm. And because you want the brand to be complementary to your ID. Legal concerns, definitely trademarks, patents, employee contracts, funding. So we recommend folks read venture deals and consult with lawyers. Liam Casey's greatest attribute, just his drive. I mean, he started PCH back in 1996, and it started out with just him and a couple of people, and is now well over 2,500 people managing Apple supply chain. HIghway1 is just one part of it. His openness to expanding what the definition of PCH is pretty impressive. To elaborate on the last, our brand story is pretty involved, and that chunk of curriculum might not add much more. Always want. Jesper, so I mean, that's great that your brand story is pretty evolved. Often folks decide which part of the curriculum they want to spend time on. And if your pitch is great, then you want to spend much time on it. But, you know, often when companies come in, they think that something is working great and actually can use more time. So I don't think that the work that we would do on your story would be wasted. But we'll see. All right. Well, we're getting close to the end. I'll take a couple more questions and then I'm going to sign off. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Brady, or just mail me brady@highway1.io. And our applications are going to be open through next Monday. We've got a lot of interesting companies that have applied so far, and I'm pretty excited to see what all of you have. Thanks for being patient with the Hangout. The interface is more confusing than I ever remember. And it's almost like it was a Microsoft product. And I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think I'm gonna tune out. All right, thank you all very much for participating today, and I wish you all the best of luck. May the odds be ever in your favor.